It is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano here with you on a Friday in July, the first day of the proverbial second half of the 2025 season. The All-Star break has come to a close. So did the first half of the season on Sunday, and so did the MLB draft on Monday. And on this show, I'm going to be taking a look at the Orioles' massive 24-man draft class and a massive $19,144,500 bonus pool that the Orioles have with which to sign these players. And if the 2019 MLB draft, the first one under Mike Elias as GM, was the crown jewel of his tenure so far, he's hoping that this 2025 class will rival it in terms of depth and premier talent. Earlier this week, John Mioli, my usual co-host, and I broke down day one. The Orioles took 7 players in the first day of the MLB draft class. That included Ike Irish, that included Caden Bodine, and Vahiva Aloy. And today, I'm going to be joined by Baseball America's Carlos Collazo to break down the rest of the draft, as well as going back and talking about Irish and Bodine. All of that and much, much more coming up on the other side of this quick break.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
We're delighted to be joined on the Banner Baseball Show by Baseball America draft analyst Carlos Collazo. You probably saw him on the MLB Network broadcast during the MLB draft, and we're here to talk about the Orioles' massive 24-man draft class. Carlos, got to start at the top with Ike Irish, a guy that not many thought would make it to the Orioles at number 19. Pretty much everybody, it seems like, who was in on this kid figured he would go top 15, maybe even top 10, because the bat is just that good. Obviously, there are some concerns defensively, but in your opinion, why was this guy considered a top 15 prospect?
Yeah, I had heard he had interest all the way up to number 2 with the Angels in this class. We had him mocked, I think, at the number 7 spot in our final mock draft. I definitely expected him to be gone inside the top 10 picks and then conservatively inside the top 15 picks. We had him ranked as the number 2 college hitter on our board behind only Iva Arquette. And I know we were kind of speculating after the Orioles acquired the 37th overall pick and then jumped into the biggest bonus pool we've ever seen in the bonus pool era territory. Like, okay, every year there is some player we don't expect to slide who has a chance to slide. And if they do, Baltimore is going to be a really good landing spot for whatever player that is, just because they have so much money to throw around. Turns out that was Ike Irish. This year, I feel like his profile fits with the hitters that Baltimore has typically targeted in this range. He's a left-handed hitter with a lot of power, a lot of on-base value. And why we like him so much is I do think he's one of the most well-rounded college hitters in this class. I think you could really critique a lot of the college bats, whether that's because they don't have a lot of impact or they have real missed questions. Ike is really a hitter, I think, that does just a lot of things well in the batter's box. He was one of the best performers in the SEC this spring. I think his conference OPS was second in the conference. He was drafted as a catcher, which is interesting because the Orioles have a lot of good catching prospects and a pretty good one at the major league level right now, and also took Caden Bodine at catcher. And I think most scouts probably view him as a future corner outfielder, but I would not be so aggressive to push him off the position, if only because we've seen so many college catchers and just amateur catchers in general in recent years who are viewed skeptically at the position and then make massive strides defensively once they get into pro ball and really focus on it. I think Ike is a really good athlete. I think he's got an easy plus arm that would fit back there. He runs well for a catcher, so maybe that makes him easier to slide off the position. But if he's a catcher, if he's a right fielder, if he's a first baseman, I still really like his bat and think it's going to profile wherever he winds up defensively.
It's such an interesting projection, too, because it's so rare in today's game to find a big league catcher who hits so well. Somebody like Adley Rutschman and somebody like you guys expect Samuel Basayo to be. So if he is a catcher, I mean, you're talking about a premier bat at a position where, no, he's not going to play 162 games, but he could play a lot of games behind the plate at a very important defensive position. Suddenly that player becomes super valuable. But as you said, the bat is so good that if you stick him in right field, he will be able to provide a lot of offensive value as well. And that plus arm will certainly play there as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you mentioned Caden Bodine. Probably viewed by more scouts as a more sure thing behind the plate. Do you see Caden Bodine as somebody who will definitely stick at catcher? And you also mentioned on your Future Projections podcast that you had heard that the Orioles were connected to UNC catcher Luke Stevenson, who was taken 35th overall by Seattle. Is there certain differences between those two catchers, and why do you think the Orioles may have gone with Bodine?
Yeah, I would be shocked if Bodine didn't catch at the next level. I think both he and Stevenson, who you mentioned, are the consensus top two true catchers. Like if you're just projecting Ike to move off the position, Bodine and Stevenson are catchers who I've not talked to a single scout that thinks either one of these players won't play the position and play it at a pretty high level in pro ball. Bodine and Stevenson are antithetical offensively. They have very different offensive profiles. And we had heard Stevenson connected more to the Orioles in the lead up to the draft than Bodine. So I think it's interesting that they took the kind of the opposite of his offensive profile. Bodine is a very hit first switch hitting catcher. He makes a ton of contact, some of the best contact rates in the class. He has always shown just elite bat to ball skills in his Coastal Carolina career. He's done the same with a wood bat in summer leagues. And he just doesn't have a lot of power. I mean, he's hitting at a fairly hitter friendly park in college. His in-game power production has declined year over year. Excuse me. And I think it's well below average raw power right now. And so if you look around at the catchers in baseball, I think it is more common to have a power over hit catcher at the major league level. That profile just feels more common at the position for whatever reason. But I do think Bodine could be a very valuable catcher because he's going to hit for high averages, even if he doesn't have a ton of impact. And then he's also one of the best receivers and framers in the class. I talked to scouts who were just thrilled with the strides he made in that department this spring. He really knows how to set up behind the plate. He doesn't actually have the biggest arm in the world, but his anticipation and his actions and his exchange are so quick that the arm consistently plays as at least solid average, and the throwing is exceptionally accurate with him. So I think he's going to check all the boxes you want defensively while bringing, I mean, I mentioned this on the broadcast, we put 2 60 hit tools in this class. One was Casey Cunningham, a high school shortstop out of Texas. The other was Caden Bodine.
Interesting. Let's talk pitchers because that's the one thing Orioles fans want to talk about the most. The Orioles still did not take a pitcher in the first round. They have never done so when Mike Elias has been GM, but they took 13 pitchers in their 24-man class. That's tied for the most under Mike Elias. He also took 13 pitchers 2 years ago in 2023, and so far the fruits of that are already being shown in the Orioles minor league system. Michigan State's Joseph Jurwa was the first pitcher that the Orioles took this year, highest pitcher that Elias has ever drafted. For fans who are looking at this draft class and saying, well, the Orioles need pitchers, they need starting pitchers in this system, why aren't they taking pitchers? Is there a certain advantage that teams can have by drafting hitters early? And is there potentially more value in the pitcher market later on in the draft than there would be in the hitter market? Like, are there more better pitchers available later in the draft than there would be hitters?
I think a lot of teams do think that you can find hidden gems on the pitching side later in the draft a lot easier than you can with hitters. There are a lot of teams that believe that you should tackle some of the best hitting prospects in the class early and then take a bunch of dart throws on pitchers later because the risk of pitching prospects in general is higher. A lot of these guys are just going to get injured. So if you can just load up on a lot of pitchers who have traits that you like or do things well that you can't teach, and maybe they do some other things at not a great level that you feel pretty good about your player development group unlocking at the next level, that's a strategy that a lot of teams, I'll note the Brewers, the Twins in particular, who have done a nice job taking hitters early and then pitchers later who popped later. And very clearly Baltimore is of this mindset since Mike Elias has been running the team. They still have not taken a pitcher inside the first 50 picks. It was kind of funny to hear all of, like, we did a bunch of draft chats in the lead up, and every draft chat we would do, Orioles fans would be asking, is there a chance there's a pitcher who fits for the Orioles at 30 or 31 with all these extra picks? Even before they picked up 37, they're like, what pitchers make sense? And I was really like, honestly, I don't expect them to take arms this early because they've just been allergic to taking arms that high. They are able to get a large volume this year just because of how many picks they have, but Joseph Jerwa, I think, is a really interesting arm. We had him ranked right in the second round where he went to Baltimore. He's got plus control. He's got one of the better changeups in the college class. It's a high usage pitch that has a lot of whips. He's 6'8", 200 pounds, has this like low slingy arm slot. So I think he's a pretty high probability starter for me. The fastball slider are not super electric right now, but maybe he's a guy that you could look at and say, hey, we can add some more strength. We can get him throwing a little bit harder. There's some delivery tweaks we can make to allow the fastball to play up. I think it's a pretty well-rounded college pitching profile to start out for some of these arms.
So Jerwa was the first of 13 pitchers that the Orioles drafted. They took 2 catchers, the first 2 at the top, 5 infielders, 4 outfielders as well. The draft was broken into 2 days instead of 3 this time, and we had the Orioles take 7 guys on day 1 and then a bunch on day 2. Were there any guys on day 2, Carlos, that you thought might stick out as guys that were perhaps a little bit underrated?
I think Jaden Laurie is a guy in the 5th round that I'll highlight here. He was so he's a shortstop out of Corona del Sol High School in Arizona, 5th round pick, 154th overall selection. He was very much a split camp player from the industry. So if you're not familiar with that term, like a lot of the scouts I talked to really, really liked him. And then some other scouts maybe wanted him to get to campus at BYU. But I think he has interesting hitting traits. It's a very clean swing. He's got good contact skills. It's pretty simple. There are not a ton of like super loud physical tools with him, but I am fairly intrigued with the bat. He was a player whose swing just stood out to me the more I dug into him. So that's a player I wonder what he's going to look like in pro ball. And then right in front of him in the 4th round, I don't think it's a huge sleeper because he had such a great season, but Colin Yeaman, a shortstop out of UC Irvine, he had a tremendous year, 13 home runs, 16 doubles, gets on the barrel consistently, fairly disciplined hitter. I think he's got a solid chance to play a middle infield position. So he just does a lot of things well. These are both players like up the middle prospects that aren't super toolsy, but have really instinctive hitting traits that I find myself kind of liking in the middle of this Baltimore board after the famous names on day 1.
And obviously, it's a massive bonus pool that the Orioles have at their disposal to be able to sign these guys. 24 players is a lot of players to sign, even for the largest bonus pool in MLB history. Teams have until Monday, July 28th at 5 o'clock to sign their draft picks. And I feel like it's unlikely that the Orioles would come home with all 24 of these guys, especially considering they took high school players in competitive balance round A, the 5th round, as you just mentioned, the 18th round. They took junior college players in rounds 9, 12, 14, 15, 16, 19, and 20. When you have that much money at your disposal, you certainly have an advantage. But do you feel like the Orioles might be able to come out with, especially some of the guys that they took at the top? And I know a lot of fans will be closely watching Slater DeBrun, who was a competitive balance round pick. Do you feel like the Orioles might be able to allocate their money correctly in order to come home with most of these dudes?
Yeah, I think the safe assumption for every team in the draft is that any player who's taken in the first 10 rounds, you should assume they're going to sign until you hear that they're not going to for some reason, because the hit rate on teams signing these players in the bonus pool era is north of 97%. Players are only not signing in this range if a team has massively miscalculated the signability, or if some injury situation pops up that maybe changes what the deal is going to be and the team and the player can't agree to that. So I do think that I would expect the Orioles to sign every player in their class on the college side. William Johnson, a high school player in the 18th round. We had him ranked in a decent spot. He's committed to Georgia. We heard he might be a tough sign. So he's like the one player I would look at and say, okay, that one might be surprising. In this 20-round draft, we see some teams take high school players as kind of flyers. I don't know if they're necessarily backup options or just like a hat tip selection. So I probably wouldn't expect him to sign. I'm uncertain about all these junior college players. The Orioles did take like 6, I think, junior college players in the 11 to 20 round range. Those players can be a little bit tricky for me from this seat to kind of pick out their signability, but I would be surprised if anyone inside their first 10 rounds didn't sign. They've got a ton of money to move around. It is fairly college heavy, so there are only going to be a couple of high school players, I assume, that are taking huge kind of overslot deals here. Otherwise, to me, I look at their draft and it feels like they played it relatively straight up and got really good value at all of their picks. We were just doing draft reviews for every team, and our theme for Baltimore was great value hitters, because I think all all of their first 4 hitters, we had ranked higher on the BA board than where Baltimore actually got them. So,
yeah, I know a lot of fans certainly enjoyed the pick of Vahiva Loy at 31 overall, a guy who won the top prize in all of college baseball last year, and yet the Orioles were able to take him with their 3rd pick on day 1. Some of the schools that some of these draft picks were taken from as well. I mean, had you ever heard of, obviously during your draft prep, I'm sure you knew every single player from every single school, but
I can't say that much, but
Mineral Area Junior College was one of them. Odessa
we actually had
College.
Cam Lee on the back of our 500, so I was aware of that
There
one only because of that. I heard of Odessa before. So yeah, most of the schools you kind of hear about. There are some smaller junior colleges each year that maybe you're like, I'm not sure if I've heard that one before. But yeah, Cam, I actually think Cam is an interesting flyer. That maybe should have been the name I pointed to right away when you asked about sleepers, because he's a good athlete. He's a plus runner, center field profile. His performance at Mineral Area was phenomenal. I mean, 13 home runs, hit almost 450. So I'll be really curious what he looks like in pro ball. I think he might be a little light in terms of the impact department, but for a 9th round pick who I wouldn't expect to get a huge bonus, I think it's a fun play on an athlete.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of these fans see the school and go, where
right.
is this school? But I mean, 2 years ago, the Orioles took Michael Ferret in the 14th round out of State College of Florida, Manatee, Sarasota, and he's might be their best pitching prospect in the organization right now. So
yeah, and that's a bit of a powerhouse for junior colleges. They have guys seemingly most year, but I think that's the beautiful thing about the draft too, is that you can really get players, big leaguers, from anywhere. The guys who make it from these sort of unknown areas or smaller programs, it's fun to see those players pan out.
It's also just goes to show how many scouts there are across the country taking notes on all of these guys that you would never imagine.
Absolutely.
We're out there. Carlos Collazo, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you get to finally enjoy some sleep after what has been a ridiculous probably 2 months for you. But where can everybody find your good work as you start getting ready for the next draft and you take a look at where all these guys are going to fit into their respective farm systems?
Yeah, baseballamerica.com is probably the best place to go to check out anything I'm doing. We already have a way too early mock draft for next year's class where we look at the top 10 picks. The hit rate on that is actually pretty decent in terms of just like IDing some of the top players in the class. So if you want to get a head start on next year, that's up. We also have our first combined 2026 top 100 list. Both Ben Badler and Peter Flaherty at Baseball America have done a lot of work on the underclass guys to just get us ready for that immediately, because that draft cycle has already been going on for a few weeks now, which seems crazy. But baseballamerica.com for me. You can follow me on Twitter at Carlos A. Collazo. I'm kind of tweeting out a bunch of signings now in the run up to signing deadline. So if you're really locked in as a super diehard draftnik and you want to know exactly what's going on with Baltimore's signings, hopefully we can start to get a few of them in the next few days. But those are the two probably best areas.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carlos. We're going to take a quick break on the Banner Baseball Show. Be back in a minute.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, before we get out of here, I do want to shout out a couple reviews, because if you leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, I will read it out here on the show. I have to keep my promise. Got one from Frank, who says, if you are looking for a fair, unbiased, and informative Orioles podcast, this is the one. Those reporters on the beat and are valuable resources to any O's fan. Thank you so much, Frank. And then from Beck D, gave it 5 stars, says, I love this show. Paul and John have a great rapport, and they really go deep into the minutia of the Orioles stats at a level that my nerd brain loves. They always provide great insights and analysis into each scenario, and it's been wonderful to be on this journey with them this season. Thanks so much for those reviews. I will read out your review if you write it. Please subscribe to the Banner Baseball Show anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can watch it each week on Facebook, X, and YouTube, or listen to it anywhere that you get your podcasts. I'll have John Mioli back on with me next week as we look ahead to the MLB trade deadline, look at some players that the Orioles could be selling if indeed they do go into sell mode, and maybe some players that they'd be best served holding on to. In the meantime, subscribe to the Baltimore Banner, just $1 for 6 months to read all of John and Andy Kuska, Danielle Allentuck, and Kyle Goon. I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.